The Vance estate shimmered in twilight, its lights casting gold over manicured hedges and marble statues like a stage set too perfect to be true. I stepped out of the car alone. No hand at my waist. No reassuring grip at my back. Just me, in navy silk and heels half a size too high, walking into a world that once applauded my presence and now waited to devour it. The click of my heels echoed against the stone as I entered the grand hall. Chandeliers caught every facet of the crystal flutes guests clutched like lifelines. Laughter floated over the music, charming. Too rehearsed. Faces turned. Smiles landed just short of warm. A murmur to my left. "That's Evelyn Rowe." I heard she, but the rest drowned in champagne bubbles and clinking silver. Margot stood center stage in a wine-colored gown. Her posture regal. A serpent wrapped in satin. Her eyes brushed mine, cool and amused, as if she'd already won a game I hadn't agreed to play. I smiled back, poised. Performances begin with the smallest glance. A waiter appeared, offering a cocktail the color of a Caribbean lei, deep ocean blue with a shimmer under the chandelier light. I paused. That color. That exact hue. Last year, the clinic in Dallas, the fertility treatment, where nothing went right. And everything unraveled. I hadn't tasted that shade since. As I watched, Margot lifted her manicured hand and touched her thumb to her middle finger, one subtle motion. The waiter gave a barely perceptible nod. My spine straightened. I accepted the glass, turned it gently in my hand, and smiled for the nearby camera. I didn't drink, just held it like I belonged. From across the room, Luther laughed louder than necessary, leaning in close to Raina's ear. His posture screamed charm, but his eyes darted too quickly. They were performing too. I moved deeper into the crowd and nearly collided with her. A stranger in a deep red dress, tailored, flawless. Her perfume was unfamiliar, expensive, calculated. Her eyes locked onto mine. Cold, restless, nervous. The kind of nervous that doesn't come from shyness, but knowledge. Margot's gaze flicked in our direction, her head giving the slightest tilt of acknowledgement. A chill threaded my spine. That wasn't just a guest. That was a variable, a weapon, a message. I tracked Margot as she approached a staff member, pretending to fix her earring while slipping something into a napkin she handed off with a smile. Another piece on the board moved. I didn't yet know what it meant, but it wasn't benign. From the corner of my eye, Luther again, this time brushing Raina's arm as she said something only they could hear. He laughed too hard. Again, Margot caught my glance. Her smile never wavered. My father's voice echoed in my memory. Pay attention to what's not being said. I stood near the bar, untouched cocktail in hand, counting every unspoken cue. They weren't just trying to humiliate me. They wanted to disarm me. Legally, emotionally, maybe even biologically. I looked down at the glowing drink. A trap with a twist of lime. Across the room, Margot lifted her glass toward me. Still smiling, I raised mine in return. Letting our eyes meet for the briefest second. Our glasses clinked without ever touching. I swirled the drink, slowly, calmly, but the storm inside me surged. Don't blink, don't flinch, smile like they're already losing. I slipped through a side door and out onto the balcony. The night air was heavy with jasmine and deception. Below, the estate's fountain whispered secrets only the ivy might overhear. I pulled out my phone and typed. Carefully, deliberately. She's starting it tonight. I need you on standby. Sent. I didn't know how deep this would go yet, but I knew one thing for certain. This cocktail wasn't the only thing laced with poison. I hadn't been gone 5 minutes before I saw it, Raina. Lingering too long at the catering station near the mirrored column, her hand slid a glass onto the tray before the waiter even turned. It was deliberate, too precise. Then she picked up another drink, identical. Ocean blue, and floated back toward the crowd with the kind of carefree grace only people with something to hide ever perfect. She passed the glass to the same waiter who'd handed mine to me earlier. Her smile was too wide, her steps too timed, and when she thought no one was watching, her eyes flicked to Margot. In that moment, the picture sharpened. This wasn't about champagne and gossip anymore. Margot was orchestrating every step of the evening, and she'd been planning something deeper. Something that went beyond humiliation. She was aiming to end me at my roots. I remembered the clinic again, drive. Monroe's expression unreadable as he scanned the lab work. Inconclusive, odd hormone levels, no cause found, just concern disguised as neutrality. And I sitting there with that metallic taste of shame. Had blamed biology. I was wrong. I adjusted my posture, lifted my chin. The silk of my gown felt heavier suddenly. Like armor. My father's voice surfaced again. Real danger doesn't scream, it smiles and waits. I walked through the crowd like I belonged there, because I did, and approached Raina as she stood admiring her reflection in the window. Fingers gently wrapped around her glass. Lovely dress, I said, voice calm, eyes on hers. She turned, blinking, caught off guard but quickly recovered. Yours too. Midnight blue suits you. I moved closer, letting the proximity feel natural. My hand, with the same ocean blue cocktail, lifted in a mock toast. She returned the gesture, and there, in a single practiced movement, I swapped our glasses as I leaned in, brushing her shoulder lightly. Raina never noticed. Just over her shoulder, a young waiter juggled a tray and his phone. His TikTok recording light glowed red as he captured the background, our exchange a blur in the reflection of a crystal sconce. He grinned at his screen, oblivious to the quiet war playing out. I didn't even glance directly, but I noted it. One more card in my sleeve. We clinked glasses. I smiled. She drank. I didn't. I turned, gliding toward the garden door. Over my shoulder, I caught her walking back to Margot, who welcomed her with a hand on her back, gentle, approving. Margot's gaze scanned the room, her shoulders softening like a woman confident her scheme was falling into place. But her calm came too early. Because this time, I wasn't reacting, I was writing the script. My phone buzzed. Dean Holloway. Confirm if we're green-lighted tonight. My reply, yes. Raina's cheeks were flushed now. A light sheen of sweat crept along her hairline. She dabbed it away with the back of her hand, laughing too quickly at a joke no one else heard. I watched her, not with vengeance, but with precision, the kind you hone when the cost of being careless is your body. Your life, your future. To the audience watching, I wonder. Ever wonder how far someone will go to stay in control? Let me show you. Because in this world, harm doesn't come as fists. It arrives in tailored suits and monogrammed napkins. It's delivered with compliments and swallowed in sips. I slipped back inside, moving through the lounge wing, a hushed space of velvet couches and gold fixtures where secrets settle like dust. I dialed Marcus. Mark footage from 7:48 p.m. The background. Look for red light on the waiter's tray. That's the play. Copy, he replied, crisp as ever. Then Clara. They're moving. If she collapses, activate Protocol 3. I want nothing linked back. You've got it. 3 steps ahead, always. This wasn't retaliation. It was insurance. My future was no longer their playground. As I stepped back into the ballroom, my heels clicking with the confidence of a woman reborn, I murmured to myself, quiet enough only I could hear. Let's see who really owns this family. The chandelier light fractured across the ballroom like broken glass, glinting off the polished marble and the rim of my untouched drink. I stood among the glittering crowd, still as a statue, the same smile frozen on my face. Around me, conversation dimmed into a hum, the calm before thunder. Margot lifted her flute of champagne, the queen calling her court to attention. Raina mirrored her with obedient precision, the reflection of a reflection. I raised my glass last, slow and deliberate. To family, Margot declared, her voice carrying through the air like a verdict. I met her gaze and replied softly, to truth. The clinking sound rippled across the room, delicate, melodic, and yet, in my ears, it was a bell toll, a signal that something irreversible had just begun. Luther leaned toward me, his cologne thick with the memory of what used to be love. You look tense, he murmured. I turned just enough for him to see the calm mask I'd perfected. I'm just watching, I said. He chuckled nervously, unaware that I was watching everything, his mother's slight smirk, Raina's confident swallow. The flicker of satisfaction that crossed Margot's face as she lowered her glass. Only seconds passed before the orchestra's tune swallowed the moment. But the air was different now, charged. Electric. Raina's laughter floated once more. Too bright, too forced. Then, almost imperceptibly, it broke. Her hand trembled as she set her glass down. Within minutes, the color drained from her cheeks. The shimmer on her skin wasn't highlighter, it was sweat. A couple near her exchanged a glance. Whispering. I stepped forward. The concerned wife. The gracious guest. Are you all right? I asked softly, my tone laced with care that could almost be believed. Her eyes darted to Margot, who met them with that same perfect poise until, for half a second, the mask cracked. A flicker of panic, then gone. Luther's brow furrowed. Raina? He asked, reaching out. The orchestra faltered. The notes hung in the air, unfinished. I caught Margot's reflection in the mirrored column. Her expression screamed what her lips wouldn't. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. The night, once seamless, began to unravel thread by thread. A memory hit me, a different light. A different room. Dr. Elias Monroe's office. His voice careful, too careful. Evelyn, your hormone levels were never low. These reports, someone modified them. What do you mean modified? He sighed. I mean altered, falsified. Someone didn't want you to conceive. That memory lived behind my calm exterior like a blade behind silk. And to the audience listening now, let me say this. Ever trusted the system, only to find out it was built to break you? That's the moment you stop asking why and start asking who benefits. I glanced at my phone beneath the tablecloth. A message from Dean popped up like a ghost. Need confirmation? Do we go public with the medical data? I typed back. Cross-check record 2910. Match dates first, then move. Meanwhile, somewhere across the room, the young waiter from earlier, blissfully unaware, uploaded his TikTok clip. The background shimmered with luxury, guests laughing. A toast mid-motion. And there, in the corner of the frame, two women, one in blue, one in red, swapping glasses. He captioned it, "Rich people be dramatic." Within 10 minutes, the clip reached Harper Quinn. She was quick. Her comment appeared beneath it like a spark catching dry grass. That's not just a drink. That's evidence. Notifications flickered on my phone screen like fireflies. I didn't react. The truth spreads faster than poison. Margot, however, began issuing orders to staff under her breath. No phones. Lock the exits. Keep it quiet. But control is an illusion. And tonight it was slipping through her manicured fingers. Raina's knees buckled first. The crystal glass in her hand slipped. Shattered. The sound splitting the air. The music stopped mid-note. A collective gasp followed, an orchestra of panic. Someone call an ambulance, Luther shouted, his voice cracking between fear and confusion. Margot rushed forward, commanding, block the cameras, nobody films this. Her tone wasn't maternal, it was royal. I stood motionless, or appeared to. Inside, every breath was measured, each heartbeat deliberate. I wasn't surprised, not horrified. Just aware. The scene played like theater. And for once, I wasn't the tragic heroine. I stepped forward slightly, whispering, not for anyone to hear, but for the echo of my own resolve. When the bell rings, someone always pays. The chandeliers swayed above us, their light trembling as paramedics pushed through the chaos. Margot turned her head slowly. Her eyes found mine across the fractured floor. Neither of us spoke, but in that look, everything shifted. A silent declaration. The war had officially begun. The study smelled like cedar and ink. The scent of memories too old to be rewritten. I sat in my father's old leather chair. The soft creak beneath me, a sound I hadn't heard since he last called me, kiddo. His handwriting stared back at me from a sealed envelope tucked inside a copy of Business Ethics and the American Legacy. Samuel Rowe never did anything accidentally. I opened it. Evelyn, it began, bold and without sentimentality. They will try to diminish you. Not because you are weak, but because they know you're not. The line that cut deepest, you deserve to be the first choice. Not the fallback. My throat tightened. A memory pulled me backward. Years ago, the boardroom was a theater. And I was just a silent audience member. Margot sat at the head. Luther beside her, smiling like he'd earned the spotlight. I had prepared the proposal. Spent weeks on the analysis. But when the time came, Margot looked at me and said, "Let Luther present this one. You're still finding your voice." I hadn't spoken. I'd smiled. But inside, the humiliation was a storm. Now, sitting in the glow of a brass lamp, I saw the letter for what it was, a warning and a charge. "They never meant to let you win," he wrote, "so stop playing their game. Make them play yours." I folded the paper, pressing it flat with fingers that didn't tremble. Behind me, the antique clock ticked louder than any boardroom applause I'd ever received. And to the audience watching, I'll ask, have you ever found the truth not in what was said, but in what someone had the courage to leave behind? A knock. Sharp. Surgical. I opened the door to Margot's assistant, stoic. Clean-cut. Voice like a filing cabinet. "For you," he said, handing me a legal envelope. The headline glared. Defamation suit, Vance Family Corporation. It didn't rattle me. It confirmed the war had shifted. I smiled, not because I felt amused. Because I saw her move for what it was. A bluff dressed in silk. She wasn't defending honor. She was defending a throne. They wanted to silence me. Control the narrative. Control the outcome. I texted one word, accepted. To anyone listening right now, consider this. If someone told you you couldn't speak, would you whisper, or would you make the roof collapse? I turned to the window. The Austin skyline flickered in the distance. My reflection in the glass didn't look wounded. It looked ready. Memory surfaced. I was 27, seated across from the executive board. The room smelled of cologne, arrogance, and old power. My presentation sat in a leather binder no one touched. Margot leaned in and said, "You're welcome to sit, but don't think you'll lead." And I hadn't, not that day. But I'd remembered every word. Now, those words were bricks in the foundation of something I was rebuilding. Was I ever just a seat filler? I asked myself aloud, or a threat in disguise? I turned to my father's archive shelf. Found the binder, dusted it off. The ideas still held, so did I. I sat down and scribbled in a notebook, "Tonight, I act, not react." On the desk, I laid out the letter, the lawsuit, and an old photo of Dad. His smile still steady, his eyes still fierce. Alignment, past, present, proof of identity. I picked up my phone. "Dean," I said when he answered. "Pull any case involving boardroom manipulation framed as medical interference. We might need to define assault differently." He didn't question me. He never did. To the audience again, they planned for me to be quiet. I chose to be loud. Not with volume, with precision. I stood, ran my hand over the edge of the photo one last time, and walked toward the door. A buzz. Camera feed from Vault 12C. They're logging in now. I smiled as I opened the door. The past had whispered. The power had shifted. But the vault was about to speak. The boardroom was a theater of glass and silence. Morning light slid across the table's polished surface, catching the edges of untouched coffee cups and silver pens. The air smelled of stale authority and expensive perfume. My nameplate sat neatly before me, but the chair beside it remained empty, as though the absence itself had been invited to the meeting. Luther sat 2 seats away, shoulders squared, expression carved from stone. His silence wasn't new, it was habitual. A kind of loyalty trained into him by his mother. Margot occupied the head of the table like a marble statue, poised. Cold, unbreakable. Across the table, Jason shifted nervously. Young, brilliant, idealistic. He used to bring me proposals and ideas after hours. Bright-eyed, certain that effort still mattered. "You'll lead someday," he'd told me once, as if prophecy could survive politics. The CEO's voice snapped through the air. "Let's begin with the morning update." I folded my hands on my lap. Pulse steady but deliberate. The room belonged to me once. But that power had always come with invisible strings. Have you ever felt like a room was yours, but the chair belonged to someone else? As the reports began, my phone vibrated against my thigh, a single, quiet tremor. I glanced down. Dean, records confirmed. Send me schedule for next steps. The words glowed like a match in the dark. I reached into my portfolio, fingertips grazing the thick envelope. Inside lay the truth, the unaltered medical report proving I had never been infertile. The lie that Margot had weaponized to make me compliant was about to expire. Margot's gaze found mine for half a second, and that faint smirk appeared again. The kind that meant she thought she still held the upper hand. They think I'm weak because I didn't shout. They don't know silence is how revolutions begin. Mrs. Rowe? The CEO asked. Any updates on the foundation audit? I nodded. Calm. In progress. Jason's eyes flickered toward me. He swallowed hard, as if something unspoken was clawing its way to the surface. He cleared his throat. If I may add, he began, voice trembling. I think we're overlooking certain reports, important ones. Margot's brow tightened, the faintest twitch of disapproval. Jason, she said evenly, that's not your lane. With respect, Mrs. Vance, I believe transparency. Her tone snapped. Security. The two men by the door moved instantly, efficient as trained dogs. Jason's words died mid-sentence as they lifted him by the elbows. Papers fluttered across the table like fallen birds. I didn't move, I watched. When you stand for someone else, I murmured under my breath, you risk becoming collateral, but you also become the threat. The door shut behind him, sealing the room back into its polished silence. I rose, smoothly, deliberately. Before we continue, I said, I have something the board needs to see. Margot didn't look up from her notepad. Evelyn, this is not on the agenda. No, I said, laying the folder on the table. But it's the foundation of every agenda you've ever written. I opened the file. These are my medical records, the originals. The ones your lab tampered with. For the first time, Margot's pen froze midair. Gasps rippled around the table. One executive whispered, this can't be. This is a personal matter. Margot cut in sharply. It does not concern the board. I met her eyes. It does when you use a woman's body as leverage for power. The words dropped like stones into water. The ripples were visible, shock, denial, dawning awareness. Evelyn Rowe, the silent wife, the compliant strategist, was gone. What stood now was a woman with evidence, purpose, and timing. Margot's voice lowered. You're overstepping. No, I said, I'm reclaiming. The balance in the room shifted. The men who had always looked through me now looked at me. The tension fractured into quiet awe and fear. I turned slightly, my voice directed both at them, and at the invisible audience I knew was watching somewhere. What happens when your home becomes your battleground? You don't retreat, you reconfigure. Margot straightened, a hint of color rising in her cheeks. The CEO muttered something about recessing the meeting. No one moved. And then, my phone buzzed again. The vibration felt heavier this time. Lunch meeting. Luther and I. He says it's urgent. I closed the folder. The sound crisp as a verdict. Love had once made me blind. Power had made me quiet. But together, they'd just become my weapon. The house greeted her with stillness. The kind that settles deep into old wood and memory. Rain painted streaks down the tall windows as thunder rolled in the distance, distant. Like the warmth once shared inside these walls. Evelyn stepped through the doorway. Heels silent on the marble. Clutching her bag as if it held more than paper and plastic. She didn't expect Clara. The young woman stood under the arch of the porch. Drenched, shaking, holding out a thick manila envelope as if it might burn her hands. I shouldn't be here. Clara stammered, but I couldn't sit with it. Evelyn took the envelope. Her eyes scanned the label. Confidential, medical billing. She opened it with the same care she once opened love letters, knowing it could change everything. Inside, clinical entries, payment codes, hormone therapies, not hers, not authorized, but billed in her name, funneled through quiet channels. Obscure labs, hormonal blockers, backdated payments. Clara whispered, they used my login, my approvals. Evelyn didn't speak. She only stared at the proof, quiet and damning. And maybe that's how the truth often arrives. Not with a crash, but folded, wet, and handed to you in a moment of shared helplessness. She turned her gaze to her left hand. The wedding ring was still there, gleaming even in the low foyer light. Suddenly it didn't fit. It felt like it belonged to another story. To the viewers now listening, have you ever held someone's guilt in your hands, and wondered what to do with it? A second later, the door creaked again. Luther. He stepped into the foyer. Rain-soaked and broken. His eyes were rimmed with red. Hair plastered to his forehead. "Evelyn," he said, voice raw, "I'm sorry." She didn't move. "I didn't know how far it went. I didn't think." She watched him, watched the man who once vowed to protect her. Now he could barely stand in her presence. "I thought I was protecting the family," he said, quieter. And in her mind, Evelyn answered, "Or protecting your legacy at my expense?" She stepped closer. No dramatics, no rage, just precision. She reached for her ring, slid it off, and placed it in his open palm. It lay there like a verdict. "I don't know who you're protecting anymore," she said, then turned. Rain pelted the windows like fingernails against glass. She walked through the hallways, each room echoing memories like faded photographs. In the dining room, the candlelight still smelled faintly of the last gala. In the hallway, a portrait of her and Luther still smiled back. Naive. She entered the library, turned on the fireplace. The flames offered warmth that didn't reach her spine. She laid the envelope flat on the desk. Each page confirmed what she suspected, a system of silencing her. Orchestrated not just by Margot but protected by layers of complicit silence. She opened her phone and began recording. "Dean, forward this to Victor Hale and Harper Quinn. It ties into Vance Foundation shell accounts. Quiet, until I say." Then to the silent camera, to those watching, she offered a truth deeper than confession. "When they silence you, they control the story. But when you find the proof, you write the next chapter." The flames danced behind her as she walked to the mantel. She opened the ring box, the one her mother-in-law insisted matched the family crest, and placed the ring inside. Not for ceremony, but for closure. She texted Clara, "Thank you. I'll take it from here." And to us, the ones listening, she spoke again, "We're never too broken to reclaim our voice. Sometimes we just need to stop listening to the noise, and read the fine print." She stood at the tall window, watching rain race down the pane in parallel streaks, like all the paths she never took. Her reflection stared back at her. Clearer now. Behind her, footsteps. Luther again. She didn't turn. "It's time you left," she said. The rain didn't stop, but neither did she. The morning light crept through the blinds like a quiet reminder, yesterday's storm had passed. But the air was charged with something new. Evelyn sat at her home office desk. Files sprawled like battle plans across the surface. Her coffee sat cold, untouched. She didn't need caffeine. The decision had already been made hours ago, sometime between silence and resolve. She picked up the phone and dialed. "Dean," she said, voice low but steady. "File it. Counter lawsuit. Emotional and financial coercion." There was a pause on the line. Not hesitation, just acknowledgement of the shift. The printer began to hum, spitting out pages of strategy and consequence. That sound, oddly rhythmic, felt like a war drum. Dean's voice returned, taut. "This will make Margot desperate." Evelyn didn't flinch. Desperate people reveal themselves. She sealed the envelope herself, pressing her initials against the flap. She would not delegate this moment. She would own it. To the ones listening now, sometimes power doesn't roar. It signs on the dotted line. At 3:17 p.m., Dr. Elias Monroe arrived at her door under the guise of a post-checkup courtesy visit. But the man who entered wasn't a physician. He was a haunted witness. "I have something you need to hear," he said, his hands trembling. He placed his phone between them and pressed play. Margot's voice poured into the room, sharp and cold. "Alter the report. No grandchild, no inheritance. Make sure it looks real. If you want to keep your license." The words didn't surprise Evelyn. What hit her was how rehearsed they sounded, like Margot had done this before. Elias couldn't meet her eyes. "I kept this for years. I was afraid." Evelyn took a long breath. Steady, now you're free. And so am I. She copied the audio file to a drive. Texted Dean with one word, insurance. And for those listening, have you ever realized your silence was part of someone else's power? Later that day, Evelyn sat across from a man half her age and twice as jaded. They met in a quiet cafe off 6th. He wore a hoodie, sleeves pushed up, laptop open. Marcus, a myth in cyber ethics. You find information, Evelyn said, calmly. He nodded once. I find patterns. Information's just the echo. She slid the folder across the table. Then echo her downfall. Passwords, timelines, clinic logins, a roadmap to the empire Margot built on stolen trust. Marcus smirked, fingers already moving. It's poetic when the oppressed learn the code. Back at home, Evelyn transformed her office into a command center. One wall was covered, receipts, screenshots, photos, pins and thread like a web. The spider wasn't Margot anymore. Dean called. The press will catch wind soon. You ready? She didn't look away from the board. They'll hear my story when I tell it. She closed the blinds, sat down at her laptop. She opened a blank blog page and typed the headline, When a Family's Legacy Turns Poison. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, You're not the only one with recordings. She stared at it, blinked once, and smiled. Evelyn stared at her phone. Its screen glowing with one headline after another. Vance family sues Evelyn Vance for defamation. The nerve, she smirked, fingers tapping out a message to Dean. Let them think they're attacking. We plant the seeds. Downstairs, the news played softly in the background. Margot, in a navy blazer and signature pearls, faced the cameras. We protect our name, she said coolly. Evelyn recognized it immediately. Theatrics, diversion, a magician's misdirection. Then her phone buzzed. Harper Quinn. I just got something. It's anonymous and explosive. Play it, Evelyn said, already pulling out her laptop. As Harper's voice filled the call, Evelyn's screen blinked to life. Marcus had delivered. The audio file loaded, timestamped and clean. The upload began, each second ticking down like a countdown. Have you ever been cornered and turned the corner instead of cornered further? On Harper's live show, the segment started with a warning. Then the clip played. Margot's voice came through crisp and cruel. Alter the report. No grandchild, no inheritance. You know the consequences. The broadcast cut to blurred footage. Drive. Elias sitting in his office, visibly shaken. Viewers heard it all. The coercion, the threat, the control. The reaction was instant. On social media, hashtags surged. In homes, gasps echoed. Evelyn didn't cheer. She didn't exhale. She just leaned back and watched the storm gather. This wasn't justice yet, it was ignition. In a high-rise downtown, Victor Hale turned from the news screen, muttering, We're exposed. Evelyn picked up her phone, texting Clara just 3 words, You did this. Inside the Vance Corporation building, panic bloomed. Margot barked orders. Legal scrambled. Employees whispered in break rooms. Calls came in to Evelyn. Board members who once avoided eye contact were suddenly interested in meetings. Dean, she said on speaker, start prepping Marcus. Press strategy. Stakeholder packets. Legal chain. It's time. Marcus replied from the background. Typing already. We'll turn their silence into metadata. When power becomes fragile, alliances shift like sand beneath the tide. Evelyn knew the shift was underway. She wasn't their enemy anymore. She was their contingency. Standing on her balcony, the Austin skyline blinking around her, Evelyn posted a tweet. Truth will always find its way to daylight. It spread fast. Comments poured in. Shares surged. She didn't look at them. Her phone rang. Harper here. The voice came. A thrill beneath the calm. Front page in 5. They're calling it the fertility fraud scandal. Evelyn smiled faintly. Make sure it sticks. She hung up and turned away from the city view. This war no longer lived in emails or whisper campaigns. It was a headline now. A reckoning. Her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. The message was short. Meeting tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. Your choice. She stared at it. tilted her head, and typed back, "I'll bring my own chair." The courtroom was quiet enough that Evelyn could hear the hum of the overhead lights. The judge adjusted his glasses. Papers shuffled, and every breath in the gallery seemed suspended in that narrow space between judgment and consequence. Dean Holloway stood beside her, serene, measured. Across the aisle, Margot's attorneys whispered, trying to look confident but failing at it. Evelyn's hands rested flat on the polished table. She didn't fidget. She didn't pray. She simply waited. The gavel came down with finality. In favor of Ms. Evelyn Rowe. The sound rippled through the room like thunder cracking over dry ground. Gasps filled the gallery. A few supporters clapped, then stopped when the bailiff motioned for silence. Dean exhaled slowly, the faintest nod of victory crossing his face. But Evelyn didn't move right away. She thought, winning isn't revenge, it's reclaiming the narrative. For the first time, she felt her name return to her, unsullied. As she stood, she caught a glimpse of Luther behind the defense table. Head bowed, unable to meet her eyes. Margot stared straight ahead, rigid, her painted smile cracked just slightly. Evelyn turned toward the rows of spectators, their faces a blend of awe and disbelief. Have you ever waited years for someone to say you were right, and when they did? It felt strange, she murmured under her breath as if speaking to them directly. She nodded to Dean, then walked out of the courtroom with a calm that felt like armor. Outside, the air exploded with flashes and shouts. Reporters lined the steps like vultures waiting for confession. Evelyn raised her chin and stopped at the microphones. "I want to thank everyone who believed in the truth," she said, her voice even, unwavering. "Justice doesn't erase what's been done, but it restores the ground we stand on." Cameras clicked. Her hair glimmered under the afternoon sun. Then she saw them, Luther and Margot standing at the edge of the crowd. He looked hollow, his posture sagging with defeat. Margot's expression was hard steel. But Evelyn noticed her clutching her handbag a little too tightly. Her phone buzzed in her hand. "Marcus, be ready," vault footage still trending on dark web. Evelyn's eyes flickered. She slipped the phone back into her coat pocket and whispered to herself. "Justice is not the finish line, it's your way out of the maze." Evelyn stepped out of the sleek black car, the velvet rope lifting before her like curtains on a stage. Flashes erupted as her heels touched the marble steps of the Vance estate. The gala had begun, champagne flowed. Laughter curled through the air, and the chandeliers shimmered like watching eyes. She wore black, not for mourning, but for precision, the kind of gown that didn't ask for attention but demanded it anyway. Her presence was unmistakable, not triumphant, but surgical, focused. The orchestra swelled into a waltz as she entered, guests parting in slow waves. Crystal clinked, sequins danced, but Evelyn only moved forward. Margot stood near the grand staircase, flanked by donors and old money loyalists. Her smile met Evelyn's like porcelain against steel, perfect. Brittle. Evelyn nodded once. The performance had begun. From across the room, Amber Holt, in a crimson sheath dress, leaned in to Luther and murmured, "She thinks she won." Evelyn, just steps away, heard it. Luther said nothing. His gaze dropped. Have you ever walked into a party when everyone thought you'd already lost, only to realize you were playing the longest game? Evelyn picked up a champagne flute from the tray of a passing server. She raised it slightly in silent toast, but didn't drink. The glass wasn't hers. She waited. A second tray floated past, headed toward Amber. Evelyn's eyes followed. The same style of flute. But this one, hers. She intercepted the server casually, rerouting the glass to Amber's hand with the grace of practiced misdirection. Amber took it, sipped, smiled, lips tight. Moments later, her jaw set, her brow pinched. She turned toward the terrace without a word, the crowd's rhythm shifting. Margot noticed. She gestured quickly to Victor Hale, who moved from his position near the auction table. Evelyn stood just inside the French doors, watching it unfold like a choreographed piece. The music slowed, instruments thinning to a solo violin, off-pitch. Eerie. Guests exchanged glances. They built the stage. Evelyn murmured to us, "I changed the script." Amber stumbled by the buffet, glass crashing against marble. Gasps scattered across the ballroom like glass fragments. A photographer's flash caught the exact moment her heel twisted, her wrist collapsing against the table edge. The whispers became audible. Margot stiffened. Hale checked his phone. Then Evelyn's vibrated. Marcus. Vault 12C upload complete. They think we're asleep. She tucked the device away and crossed the ballroom as if it were a chessboard. Step by step, the Queen moved. She reached Margot and Luther. Guests gathered like moths to heat. Evelyn's voice cut the air cleanly. "Are you all right, Amber?" she asked, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "Something you'd like to disclose?" Amber looked up from the floor. Breath shallow. The blood drained from Margot's face, not from fear, but from realization. Evelyn turned to the crowd, speaking not as the guest, but as the architect. "Sometimes when people believe in their perfection," she said calmly, "they forget how fragile it is. When someone else's facade cracks, do you watch, or do you step in?" Nobody stepped in, they just watched. The murmurs turned to murmurs of concern. Investors whispered into earpieces. The board members that once sat silently in marble rooms now leaned in. Evelyn walked to the platform where the keynote was meant to be delivered. The auctioneer froze. She took the mic. "This gala isn't about punishment," she said. "It's proof." Her gaze scanned the room, pausing on Margot. "You brought the theater. I simply adjusted the lighting." Reporters turned their cameras. Flashbulbs flickered like lightning before a storm. Margot's polished exterior broke. She turned on her heel and stormed from the ballroom, Luther trailing her in a haze of silent defeat. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was acknowledgement. Evelyn placed the mic down. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She just stood, hands steady. "When the world cheers for you, make them witness your rise, not your fall." Her phone buzzed again. Vault camera activated. Second wave begins. Evelyn turned back toward the crowd, stepped off the platform, and disappeared into the sea of guests, leaving behind a silence louder than any applause. By dawn, the video had erupted across every screen in Austin. Amber Holt, trembling in a scarlet gown, slurring half-coherent words, collapsing into a floral arrangement, captured from 3 angles and looped with the perfect bite-sized headline, "The Mistress Meltdown." Evelyn sat in a quiet room overlooking the city. The only sound the clink of her spoon against her teacup. On the wall, monitors blinked in rhythm, news anchors spinning speculation, influencers dissecting footage, hashtags multiplying. The one that stuck, #Empire cracked. The image that followed, Margot's frozen face as Amber stumbled, became the symbol of something larger, dignity undone by pretense. Evelyn leaned back. Her voice to us was soft but certain. "When they laugh at your fall, make it part of your strategy." Inside the Vance boardroom, phones buzzed with the same clip. Members who had once stood silent began calling each other, not in solidarity, but in fear. The mask had slipped. And in that slip, Evelyn knew, was her opening. At 11:42 a.m., Luther Vance was summoned. The boardroom was cold, framed by glass and oil paintings of power. Margot, dressed like stability itself, waited at the head of the long table. She didn't rise. Luther entered slowly, unsure, the echo of his shoes louder than ever before. The CFO handed him an envelope. No pleasantries, just resolution. Luther scanned the letter. 3 lines. Legal. Final. He blinked. This can't be. Effective immediately, the CFO said. You are relieved of all executive duties pending further review. No applause, no outrage, just stillness. From her home office, Evelyn watched via a secure stream Marcus had rigged. Her gaze was steady. Sometimes the man in the mirror, she whispered to us, is the one who sold you out. Luther didn't argue. He just folded the letter and walked out. The portrait of his grandfather, stoic, watchful, loomed behind Margot as if judging every breath she took. She didn't flinch, but she didn't smile either. By early afternoon, Evelyn stood just outside that same boardroom. Invited this time, not summoned. No need for flair, her tailored navy suit was enough. The members were already seated, murmuring, Dean Holloway at her side, Marcus standing in the back. silent as stone. Evelyn placed one thin folder at the center of the table. Proof of internal manipulation, medical falsification, financial coercion. Margot tried to speak. Evelyn raised a hand, never looking at her. You tried to silence me, she said. Now I lead you, in silence. It hit like a drumbeat. The room tilted. A pause. Then heads nodded, slowly at first, then steadily. What had once been Margot's fortress had become Evelyn's table. When you bring truth to the table becomes yours. Outside, the sun dipped low. Evelyn stepped onto the estate's terrace, the same space where she once stood unsure. Unheard. Now, it looked different. This fight didn't heal every wound, she said, gazing out over the hills. But it exposed every chain. She didn't linger. She walked back through the great hallway. Past portraits. Past ghosts. The lights behind her stayed on. And as the doors closed, her phone buzzed. New message. Vault camera leak scheduled. Midnight. You're not free until the key you hold stops unlocking someone else's cage. The hallway to the lower level of the Vance estate was colder than she remembered. The overhead lights flickered as Evelyn stepped closer to the reinforced steel door marked 21107. For years, this door represented secrecy, suppression, and fear. Tonight, it felt like the last threshold she needed to cross. Her fingertips hovered over the keypad. She exhaled slowly, then entered the code Marcus had sent. The bolt clicked. The door opened with a slow, mechanical groan that echoed through the empty corridor like a bell signaling both an ending and a beginning. Inside, the room glowed softly, walls lined with filing cabinets, monitors, and safes. Surveillance feeds blinked in muted blues. Marcus stood in the far corner, a USB drive between his fingers. Its label simple and haunting, Vault 12C. Evelyn stepped in fully. She rested a hand on the smooth desk that once served as the nerve center of their control. Now it was hers. They built the cage under luxury lights. She murmured to us, I found the key under the floorboards. The monitor in front of her flickered, Margot in mid-conversation during a boardroom meeting. Unaware she was being archived in real time. I won't speak to the press, Evelyn said calmly, watching the screen. Let the silence speak louder than scandal. Marcus didn't argue. Instead, he stepped forward, inserted the drive, and began the upload. The system decrypted layer after layer of files, internal memos, payment trails, prescription orders, psychological evaluations, each one a weight removed from Evelyn's shoulders, and a blow to the Empire's illusion. These documents, Marcus said quietly, they'll dismantle everything. Evelyn nodded. Once this hits the press, they won't know whether to defend or surrender. He hesitated for the first time, glancing at a folder in his hand, labeled, sealed. This one, it could hurt you. You know that, right? I do. I'm not sending it. Evelyn looked him squarely in the eyes. Then that's your liberation too. With that, she closed the laptop. In another part of the city, Luther Vance's phone lit up. The message was simple. A link. A new name on every network feed. Not his, hers. By morning, Evelyn's new apartment glowed with warm golden light. The glass doors were open, and the wind carried the first cool air of fall. She stood on the balcony, barefoot, coffee in hand, overlooking a city that once nearly broke her. Now, it pulsed with quiet resilience. She scrolled through her phone, headline after headline cascading. Vance Empire unravels, Evelyn Rowe speaks through action. Not words. She smiled slightly, not victorious, but centered. Victory isn't shouting, she said, more to herself than to anyone. It's stepping into a new world while others are still cleaning up the old one. Back inside, she opened a small drawer labeled Lessons. From it, she removed her wedding ring and placed it inside. A final goodbye to a version of herself that no longer fit. She opened her notes app and typed, freedom is not what you run away from, it's what you walk toward. The screen faded to black as she turned and closed the apartment door behind her. The sound of the lock was soft but firm. Her phone buzzed once. Message. Welcome home.